Weird setup. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. Can everyone in the back, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Okay. So thank you for joining us for this first workshop in the Rebuilding Better workshop series that will be taking place this summer. Our intent is to keep these both in person and hybrid. So you can see we have a camera and a microphone set up right now. So you have some residents and neighbors joining you from home as well. So just keep in mind that's always an option moving forward throughout the summer with these. My name is Alyssa Vogan and I'm the Sustainability Analyst for the Town of Superior. And I am also joined by Kayla Betzold, who is the Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Louisville. And her and I have been collaborating on organizing these along with Zach Swank, who is the Built Environment Coordinator. That's his role with the County of Boulder, with Boulder County. He could not be here tonight, but Rachel is joining us as well as some others from the Energy Smart Division. So they'll be up here presenting in a bit. So over the next few months, these workshops will provide more details and information about the resources available on the Rebuilding Better website that will help you plan, design, and construct a comfortable, healthy, and resilient home. So just out of curiosity, how many of you have had a chance to get on the website and browse the resources that are on there a little bit? Okay, great. And that is, I don't know if we have it anywhere on the slides, but the website URL is, you get right, is rebuildingbetter.org, and that will just take you to the main page. And there are resources on there that are for homeowners as well as for builders as well. We have a very full agenda tonight with a lot of great speakers and experts in this area. I'm not one of those experts. I work, I'm a sustainability analyst, but my focus is more in community engagement, waste, and water. And so we're lucky enough to be in Boulder County, where we have a lot of experts that can talk about efficient homes, electrified homes, passive houses. We're joined by a lot of those experts tonight. And I will attempt to get everyone's name correctly. And when you come up to introduce yourselves, I'll let you maybe just give a quick bio on yourself and the work that you do. But we're joined by Robbie Schwartz and Rachel Bramlett, who are with Boulder County. We're joined by Frank Wettenkamp of the Colorado Green Building Guild and Eric Strait, who's here on behalf of Excel Energy. And so before I hand it off to Robbie, I just want to cover some quick logistics for the evening. We will do Q&A at the very end. So just hold your questions for each individual speaker. Feel free to write them down in that padfolio that you were given, and we'll cover all of those at the end. And if we start to run out of time, we will work on a way to gather all of your questions so we can send out like a follow-up document that has answers to the questions that you come up with tonight. I did mention this is a hybrid meeting, so I just ask that you're all patient with us as the issues and challenges come up with those that are online so that we can make sure that we're making this an effective meeting for everybody that's joining us. I mentioned that there were comment cards. It was one of the 3 pieces of paper that you were given at the beginning. So if you could take some time at the end to fill that out and leave it in the basket that's back there on the counter, that will help us plan the future workshops that we offer. There are drinks available over on that counter. There's water and coffee. And I think that's it, unless there's other logistics I'm forgetting.
We have a spot in the back over on this counter for comment cards at the end. So if you just want to drop them in that that box on your way out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I will hand it off to our first speaker, who's Robbie Schwartz. Is that how
Yes,
I'm saying it?
Schwartz, yes.
Schwartz? Okay. Great.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. I am a new resource for you in Boulder County, so including Louisville and Superior, obviously, as well. I am with the Energy Smart program and the New Homes Advisor there. I've been working in the building industry with codes and programs and applied building science for 25 plus years. So hopefully I can answer your questions. And if I can't answer it, I will guarantee I will find you an answer to those questions. But today we're going to be talking about comfort. And so I always come come to housing issues from kind of a building science perspective. So I wanted to talk to you about this idea of systems thinking and this integrated systems approach, because really all of these goals that we have for our new homes come through the synergy of how we put the house together in order to achieve those goals, because everything builds on everything else here. So when we're talking about comfort, we're talking about durability, efficiency, resiliency, safety, aesthetic beauty, indoor air quality, all of these things build on each other here. And if we focus in on comfort itself, we need to think about this term called mean radiant temperature. Mean radiant temperature means what is the temperature of our surroundings and how much does our body heat radiate to that surrounding surface there. And because that's what makes us uncomfortable. If I'm standing next to a window that isn't a high quality window, my body temperature is going to radiate to that window and I'm going to feel cold. Or that window, actually an air current is going to go to that window and cool off, and we're going to get a draft, which you might think is connected to outside, but it's actually just air falling down a window as it cools and moves, start creating a current in the house that creates a draft in the house there. So what we're talking about when we're dealing with comfort is how do we build a building thermal envelope that is high enough so that it's going to raise the surface temperature and create this comfort so our body temperature doesn't radiate to that cold surface there. So we think about our walls and our windows and these things called thermal bridges where the energy is moving through the framing, the actual wood in our assemblies. If we have masses of wood in our assemblies, we have colder surfaces in our assemblies. All these things are integrated, so that's a comfort issue, but it can also become a building durability issue because those cold surfaces create condensation and wetting potential in our houses. So all these things, again, are related to each other. Comfort, durability, resiliency, all those different things here. But ultimately, as a byproduct of concentrating on comfort in our houses, we're going to help reduce the loads in our houses so we can get smaller HVAC equipment to heat and cool our houses there. And it's going to help reduce our operational costs, how much we pay to heat and cool our houses as well. So again, it's all synergistic. It all builds on each other there. So we don't have a lot of time, so please ask questions at the end, and I'll stay here until we're done to get into it in more depth here. But the next thing we need to talk about from a comfort perspective is indoor air quality and how indoor air quality and comfort kind of matches together, because health and safety is a big part of comfort in our house, how we're going to breathe, what we're going to breathe in that house. So from that building science kind of perspective, we're always thinking about building our houses tight. And then this mantra, build our houses tight, ventilate them correctly for us and the house, for the occupants and for the house itself. So we're going to build our houses tight. And in essence, we want to build it as tight as we possibly can. And then we need to ventilate the house properly. So we want proper, what we call whole house controlled mechanical ventilation, because we want control and we want predictability of the airflow in that house, because the air is like a freight train. It's going to move energy, it's going to move moisture, it's going to move pollutants in and out of that house. And we want control over that so we can clean the air and we can get more comfortable, more safer air that we can breathe. And we want to be able to filter that air. We want to do all those things. We want to condition the air if we want to heat it or cool it. All those things that we want to do to create that comfortable house there. So again, we want balanced ventilation is ideal, but whole house ventilation is the most important thing. Balanced ventilation, or you might have heard this term ERV or HRV, heat recovery ventilator, energy recovery ventilator. Those are types of ventilation systems. What we're really wanting to push here is to understand we want that tight house and we want it ventilated right. Then you can figure out how you're going to do that. What's the best way for your particular house to do that, to create the comfort and whatnot. The next thing from an indoor air quality perspective we need to think about are the materials that we're going to build our house with. Those materials are often manufactured materials that are glued together and put together with all these different compounds and glues and chemicals and whatnot. So there are specific incentive programs that are being incentivized right now that help us understand the material choices that we have. Specifically, the Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Home Program uses a sister program called the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency's Indoor Air Plus program. And part of that program, it deals with material choices and gives you a whole way of picking and choosing materials you're going to put the house in together with, so that you have less off-gassing of these compounds and chemicals and whatnot that you're going to build your house with. And you also have to think about how you're going to finish the house and what kind of things you're going to bring into your house as well. So your couches, your material, your bedding, all those things potentially off-gas as well. So it's kind of, again, you have to think about the impact of the whole structure together when we think about comfort and indoor air quality. Again, from this byproduct perspective, if we're thinking about indoor air quality, we're going to have a more comfortable house to live. We'll have cleaner air to breathe. We'll also reduce costs as well in the same kind of ways there. And then the last thing I really want to talk about tonight is what I call opportunity cost. When you're building a new house, you have one opportunity to do it as best as you possibly can. And that opportunity kind of ends, depending on what you're talking about, kind of ends after you put the drywall on the house. So much of what we're talking about in order to get that comfortable house, get that house that has the clean air that we want to breathe and whatnot, happens behind the drywall. Those things that aren't sexy to look at, but are so important to ensure that you're going to get a comfortable, durable, efficient, resilient, safe, good air quality house there. Happens before the drywall goes into account. So it's important to put your team together and have these discussions before you start building with your builder, your architect, your HVAC contractor, your insulator, your engineer. Get all these people together and ensure you have a goal, a common goal and a common understanding. How are you going to move forward with building your house? Are you going to use one of these incentive programs that Eric's going to talk about to help guide you in this mission of building your house that you want to live in there? Then you're going to have that comfortable house. You're going to have that house that has good indoor air quality. You're going to have a house that performs well and will meet your expectations. That's the big thing. You want to define those expectations for your house so that you can actually achieve them with your team there. And then if you do use these incentive programs, they're building programs and they have verification built into that. So you'll work with a third-party verification group or energy rater or passive house consultant or some type of consultant that will come in and help in addition to the code official to ensure that your house is getting built the way you want it built in order to meet those core expectations. Obviously, one of the biggest ones we're talking about tonight, comfort and indoor air quality there. So that was very quick, and I'm sure there's some questions, and we'll get to those at the end, but I'm committed that we'll stay here until all the questions are answered there. So we'll pass it off to Frank.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. I just want to echo everything Robbie said, because that was really great. There are just so many things to think about when you're building a house, and it can be really overwhelming. But you know, there are a lot of basic principles that you want to stick to, and I think Robbie touched on a lot of that. And I'm going to be, I kind of just put together a bullet list from some of our previous events that we've had through the Colorado Green Building Guild. We're going to continue to host events as well, kind of in tandem with county or the municipalities. And we're going to continue to try and create partnerships with manufacturers and suppliers and things like that too. So hopefully we can find other ways to save costs. But in general, saving costs, you have to look for the free things. Sunlight is free. So if you need to heat your house in the wintertime, you need passive solar. Orient your house right, get your roof shaded so that you're not taking on too much sun in the summertime, taking on sun in the wintertime, using a little bit of mass inside so you can heat that mass up. That radiates your house, keeps you all nice and warm. That's free energy, right? And all you really have to do is make sure you can hopefully orient somewhat south. There's room, there's like a wide range of how you can orient. That's something that you want to talk to with your designer, architect, possibly your builder too. But yeah, free things like that. I think along with orientation is you want to think about the form of your building. We talk about how the more corners you have, the more expensive your house gets. And that's for like kind of multi-layered here, but just thinking about if you are just building a box, that box has very few corners. It's very easy to detail. It's very easy to heat. So you don't have super high vaulted ceilings that you have just kind of wasted air. Just thinking about how can I, first of all, reduce the size of the building I'm building and simplify the shape. How many roof lines do you actually need is just something, when the architect possibly wants to build something that, has a few dormers on it and stuff like that, just consider that all these little corners, they're, from a constructability standpoint, they're hard to detail. That's where you're gonna have more air infiltration. Not to mention, it's more expensive to frame. So, just kind of some basics. And then when you're thinking about size, you really want to think about like, what are your actual patterns? What are your actual goals for this house? What does your family need? And what rooms did you not really use? What was wasted space? Because the more square footage you have, I mean, there's obviously cost of scale, but the smaller you can build, the more affordable you can build. So try to just think about like your patterns. There's a great book called The Pattern Language. You can kind of think about like, what are my patterns on a day-to-day basis? What is my flow? What do I think my flow is going to be when the kids go off to college or, whatever your situation is. Just trying to think about what are my patterns and what are my patterns going to be? That way you can kind of design around it what your needs are. Gosh, there's just so many things to talk about, but multifunctional spaces are part of that. Like, can I have a Murphy bed that I can then utilize for guests to come over so I don't have a dedicated guest room or multiple dedicated guest rooms that never get used, just wasted space you're heating or cooling all the time. Not only does that cost money up front, but obviously your operational energy as well. So just to kind of talk real quick, just kind of bring me back to what Robbie was talking about in terms of operational costs. If you can build your house really tight and insulate right, this is your one chance to do it. And that will reduce not only your mechanical systems, the size of them, so that'll save you money, as well as just your operational cost all the time. You're not putting as much input into heating and cooling your house all the time. So I highly recommend that. Take advantage of all the rebates. People like to talk about how expensive windows are, and they are really expensive. I don't get paid by any manufacturer, but I will say that Alpen windows are discounted, and they are actually super affordable for a high-performance window. They're not necessarily the best window, but they're better than most, and they're local, which is great. Which kind of brings me on to like regional natural materials. Especially with supply chain issues that we're dealing with right now, really long lead times and things. If you can use a regional material, regional supplier, something like that, then you don't really have to deal with that as much. It's difficult to source regional materials sometimes. It might take a little bit extra effort, but it's worth at least asking your designer and your builder. Especially like when lumber costs started skyrocketing, all of a sudden local sawyers became a little bit more appealing as long as you can get it graded. There are lots of different ways you can go about it. It gets a little tricky, but just I'm going to try and rifle through some more of these. Yeah, electrification, you don't have to pay for gas. I also just think that like in general, it doesn't really matter what your political opinion on this is. I just think in general, we're going towards electrification. It's just inevitable. Gas may fluctuate. We don't really know. Electrification just kind of like is the future. So I highly recommend it. And then I think there are just some other things you could think about just in terms of universal design, durability, just building for the future, fire-wise. Universal design is just like the idea of creating a space that's more accessible to people who, you know, is not necessarily ADA, but just thinking like high curbs, trying to get rid of thresholds, those kinds of things. People can age in place. Even for retail, your house might be more appealing to someone who's older or wants to age in the house, all those kinds of things, so that you're building kind of for the future. And that kind of has to do with Firewise as well, which is, you know, we don't expect a fire to rage through our towns like it did, but maybe we want to plan for that in the future just in case. And you can look up Firewise. We did a event on it as well. If you want to go to our website and watch that video, pretty informative. We're also going to be hosting another event on June 21st, I believe. You can go to the website, look at the events calendar, but it's going to be all about just ignition resistant materials. So we'll have different reps kind of talking about ignition resistant materials that you have options for. We're not necessarily promoting one or another, but just, you know, you're kind of limited on your options. We just wanted to be able to give you some options of cladding, insulation, things like that. And then what did I not touch on? Well, high performing envelope is kind of thinking about insulation and air sealing. Personally, I'm going to throw my personal beliefs in here. I'm not a big fan of spray foam or just foam in general above grade. So if you can get away from that, that's really good for the environment. I highly recommend cellulose, double stud walls, super simple to build, pretty affordable, or at least cost competitive. But that's my own personal beliefs. You don't have, you can take that with a grain of salt. And then just thinking about environmental costs. That's part of it. You know, we were really, you were all super unfortunate. And I can't even imagine what it was like and what it's still like to be dealing with the grief and the loss. But, you know, it's really challenging because we do have, it is like, it's a time where you only really have one chance of building your house properly. Because once you put the drywall up, it's really expensive and really hard to change things inside your wall system. So kind of like now's the time. So if I can make a recommendation, it's like put your money in your envelope, and then the rest of your finishes and things like that, like you can swap those out at a later date if you need to. But trying to change your envelope, now's your only chance. So I think that's all I have. Feel free to ask questions. I know I kind of just like ping pong that around, but I'll be here. So thanks, and I'm going to pass it off to Eric.
My name's Eric Strait. I'm with Residential Science Resources here representing Excel. They are offering incentives for rebuilding homeowners in fire-affected properties. Slide, please. There are 5 different incentive tiers. The
Can
first,
you talk louder, please?
absolutely, sorry. There are 5 different incentive tiers. The first being the 2021 IECC code. This is for homes that are required by the jurisdiction to build to the 2021 IECC. You'll notice that there are 2 incentives for each of these tiers. The first one, the higher one, is for rebuilding homeowners. So if you lost your home in the fire and are rebuilding on that same lot, you are eligible for that incentive. The second lower incentive is for people who are rebuilding a home on a fire destroyed property but did not lose that home. So if somebody lost their home, is choosing not to rebuild, you buy that lot and are rebuilding there, that's that second incentive. So for 2021 IECC, for rebuilding homeowners, it is $7,500. For new residents, it is 0. The second incentive is the Energy Star version 3.2, and that is going to be $10,000 for rebuilding homeowners and $1,250 for new homeowners. Above that is DOE Zero Energy Ready version 2. This is still a draft standard, but we do have some things in place to accept this incentive before they finalize that standard. And that incentive is $12,500. These homes are designed to be ready to be zero energy at some point. They don't require solar, but they are all set up to accept solar, so they can be zero energy ready in the future when you decide to do that. The next is the Energy Star Next Gen program. This is an all electric program. So it requires electric heating, cooling, water heating, cooking, appliances, all of that. I think it does still allow gas fireplaces. It does, so that is the one gas use you can have in those homes. That incentive is $17,500 for rebuilding homeowners and $5,000 for new homeowners. And the top tier there is passive house. That incentive is $37,500 for rebuilding homeowners and $15,000 for new homeowners. Slide, please. So the process for doing this, it's very little work for the actual homeowner. Most of it is handled through the builder or architect or energy rater consultant. Most of the process that you're going to be involved in, the first step there, determine the desired tier and find a builder who can build to that. We have heard people saying they've been having trouble finding builders who can build to these because both of the Energy Star tiers are new programs that were just certified like 3 weeks ago, so there aren't a lot of builders that are familiar with it. And as I said, the Zero Energy Ready is still a draft standard, so same thing, not a lot of builders familiar with it. But there are resources out there. The website, there is a Boulder County hotline, I believe, that you can call, and they have been put in contact with some energy raters. Robbie here, of course. They know energy raters, who know the builders in the area, know who's capable of building to these standards. So I recommend you reach out to them to find a builder who can build to the standard you want. After that, most of the rest of this is handled by, as I said, either the builder, architect, energy rater, consultant, code official. Pre-qualification, it is not required for the 2021 IECC incentive. It's highly recommended, but not required for the Energy Star tiers and the Zero Energy Ready. And it is required for passive house. So if you are building to one of those above code standards, I highly recommend you talk to your builder and make sure that they are talking to us about pre-qualification beforehand, just so we can make sure that what they're building is going to qualify, and we can help them along with that process. And then finally, when the project is done, the final energy inspector consultants come through and verified everything is what it is. They submit all the stuff to us. There might be a form that you have to sign or something like that, but most of it will be filled out and taken care of by those other parties. Excel is still finalizing the pre-qualification form and the submission form. Those should be finalized very soon here. By this next meeting, I think they're having in July. Is the next one of these sessions. They should have those forms finalized so they can give you a better idea and the exact workflow, so they can give you a better idea of the process for that. And we do highly recommend building to one of these above code tiers, as Robbie and Frank were talking about. They're really going to help you with that building envelope, building these durable, healthy, comfortable homes with lower energy costs. So feel free to ask me questions at the end. Thank you. Rachel's going to.
Yep, can I add
Absolutely,
something?
of course.
I just wanted to point out that these programs are so good because it gives you a defined roadmap. Basically a checklist that you can follow to be able to meet your goals. And really all of them get you to an ultimate well-performing house. You know, there are different levels of performance, but they're all good performing houses there. So it's really important to take a look at those, not only because there's money behind them, but as somebody who doesn't build houses all the time, it gives you that roadmap to be able to do that. I'm sorry, the only other thing I wanted to point out was that the Next Gen program is on top. It's a program that takes 3.2, the Energy Star 3.2, the next step. And the last thing is that there are two passive house identities. Both are really good. They're slightly different from each other, but you have to, you need to realize that there are two pathways to achieve a passive house. And it's important to know because one of them offers a prescriptive pathway, which might be, depending on the form of your house, might be an easier pathway through that and to get that ultimate goal.
I definitely defer to him and his 25 years of experience on building science. Ask him those questions.
Great. We have one more speaker.
And I'll keep it quick. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm here to talk about the additional state funding, and I'm stepping in for Zach Sanders, as you mentioned, so. I apologize. Yes, I'm sorry, I don't talk loud. I'm here to talk about the additional state fundings. There have been two bills that have passed, the Colorado Disaster Preparedness Bill and the Recovery Resources Bill. The first will be 15 million from the Department of Local Affairs. The second will be 20 million to the Colorado Energy Office, and they will provide additional funding for rebuilding energy efficiency measures and electrification measures, and fire mitigation resources. I will note, these are not going all these funds won't go directly to the Marshall Fire. They are put in place for future disasters as well, but there will be funding allocated to the Marshall Fire. And some brand new news we just got this afternoon is the Colorado Energy Office will be offering an additional $10,000 incentive for those looking to build high-performing electric homes. So if you're, and this would be for, this can align with the Excel incentives. So everything that Eric just talked about, as long as you build to the 2021 IECC code, not 2018, and also complete electrification measures, which would generally be heat pumps for your heating and cooling, heat pump water heater for your water heating, and induction for your cooking. That should align there. As I mentioned, this is brand new as of this afternoon, so we are still working out the final details, what will be required to achieve these rebates and actually access them and all those things. But the general idea is if you're going to be adding electric elements to your home and electrifying it along with building to one of these incentive levels, then you can get an extra $10,000 on top of what Excel's providing. So that's another amount of funding that can be put into it. And I personally highly suggest going with the electrification route. All on that, it'll just leaning off of what everybody else discussed. If you build your home right, build a sturdy envelope, then you can have a smaller system and you can really run your home on electricity, and then hopefully have solar just to cover that in general. And then also there are additional discounts. If you've been on the Rebuilding Better website, you might have seen these already. These are discounts your builder, HVAC technician, insulator, all of those people can take advantage of when they're building your home to help bring down the costs of the build. So there are rebates related to ground source heat, or sorry, discounts related to ground source heat pumps, discounts related to air source heat pumps, specifically mini splits as well. And then there's also discounts related to windows. I know we have an Alpin window plug. That discount is actually specific to Alpin windows, and they're windows that were designed specifically for this as well. They're called the Louisville series, I believe. And they're designed to be a passive house performing window at a much lower cost than what some other windows would be. So I highly recommend looking at that.
What is the name again?
Alpin, ALPEN. And then we also have some discounts for air sealing products, heat recovery ventilators, and solar. And so I highly suggest taking a look at this. At least if you don't send your builder your way, they're going to be the ones that are likely going to need to be accessing and really sourcing these discounts. So definitely make sure your builder's aware of these. And there may be more to come if there's anybody who knows of other manufacturers that are willing to offer a discount. We have a form on our website that can be completed. And then the last thing I will talk about is induction cooking. I know it's a specific electrification measure. It's part of kind of the next gen program. If you wanted to access that additional $10,000, induction is a great resource for cooking, and we know it's not as common as it could be around here. So we just want to make sure people are aware of them. It is a very strong equivalent to gas cooking. It uses magnets to heat, so it's much more controllable than a typical electric stove. You have all the settings, so you can really cook. It eliminates that gas, which has harmful byproducts in the home. It's known to cause asthma. And where I'm getting with all of this is we are offering an induction cooktop lending program. Back on that counter, you're welcome to check it out. That's the cooktop that will be lent out if anyone's interested. It allows you to try out induction, see if it works for you, see if you like it. And we'll also be providing 2 pots and pans that can work with it, just so you are aware, because it is induction, you do need a certain type of pot or pan. Generally, most stainless steel works, not all. Essentially anything where a magnet sticks to the bottom of your pan is going to work on induction. But yeah, that's also on the Rebuilding website. We've already got some signups. We have a small wait list, but not too long. So if you're interested, please sign up. We would love to let everyone try induction. And that is all I have.
Okay, well, can we give all of our speakers a round of applause? That was great. Thank you. Rapid fire, so I appreciate the conciseness. We're going to open it up for questions. I have a few questions in the chat from our virtual attendees, but if anyone here has a question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll kind of field you to the right person.
Are comfortable standing? I see Frank kind of starting. If you want to come up here.
Yes, sir.
What is a rebate? Is it cash in your hand? Are there strings attached? How does it get paid?
So with the Excel rebate, it's will either be a check or direct deposit, I believe. They have all of your account information basically already. But yes, when the home is completed, they will submit the stuff to us. We will verify that we have everything that's required, and then they will either mail out a check or deposit it in your account. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you guys helping production builders or is it just for custom builders?
The resources are available, basically, I'm available to any builder or homeowner and code official that has a question that I can address. Everybody.
We are also working on a training program potentially to help give reduced rates on trainings for many of these programs. Hopefully soon we'll have that figured out. But if you find a builder and they are willing to do Energy Smart or Passive House or whatever, we can hopefully connect them with a training so that they can at least get some training on how to do these types of builds. They won't be so intimidated by it.
Excel has hosted a couple trainings for the above code certification levels by BPA. Robbie did one, and those are recorded and available for builders that would like those as well.
They're on the Rebuild website, on the builder site.
And there are plenty of Passive House trainings for both styles of Passive House. If you want to go that route too, any builder can take those. But we're also trying to we're trying to put together a discounted rate for builders and designers.
Can someone speak to the pros and cons of mini splits versus, say, traditional air conditioning or any other method? It sounds like that's closer to where we want to go.
To speak to that. So a mini split is still an air source heat pump, but instead of using ductwork, it's generally going to be ductless. So the pros and cons of an air source heat pump in general are you're moving heat from the air rather than creating it. So it's going to be a much more efficient technology. It also has the benefit of heating and cooling your home. So you don't have to worry about getting a secondary AC unit. And mini splits themselves, I love because they connect as a zones approach to your home. So you don't have to heat and cool the entire home. You can heat and cool certain areas of the home based on your needs, more or less.
Any drawbacks?
No major drawbacks. I would say what you might hear is that from people that heat pumps can't work in cold climates. That's been a kind of misnomer for a little while. The technology has really increased. There are what we call cold climate heat pumps now, some of which can operate down to -17, but it all varies. I kind of equate heat pumps to cars now. They all have a lot of different efficiency ratings. So it's just important to find the right heat pump for your home and make sure that you're having load calculations done and the proper things to make sure that heat pump is going to be adequately heating and cooling your home.
Yeah, just to add to that, a heat pump is really just a way of heating and cooling a fluid, right? And so you could potentially put that heat into in-floor radiant systems, or it could be a forced air system. And, there's a comfort level to that too, but there's also expense differences, but there's different options.
And it's super important to go back to that build tight and ventilate right and have that good thermal envelope, because when you can reduce the load on the house, the heat pumps work better and better for that. And if you're looking at mini split type heat pumps, open floor plans often work better with those. If you have there are different types of heat pumps, like the water, air to water or water, forced air systems or hydronic systems, basically, that can work with other non-open floor plans. But so there's lots of choice within that category.
Yes, I appreciate all the insight, emotional thing on the website and here, but I don't see the economics behind it other than the incentive. In other words, it costs this amount to reach this level of certification. And now I apply the rebate and I can see the differential. So the problem is we're trying to make decisions now, but we're not seeing the economics behind it. And we haven't even approached the builder yet. And so they're not there to tell us. We can't even make simple decisions without, do you have plans to lay out the economics for folks of all of these decisions?
A lot of work has been done on that before basically the COVID era hit. And the COVID era has really changed the dynamics of that. Not primarily because of inflation and supply chain issues that are the result of what we've collectively lived through here. So they're sound numbers, but they're old numbers. And basically, it's saying that getting to, Energy Star, DOE zero energy ready homes, it's about a $5,000 to $7,000 price premium from basically a code, code 2018, 2021 IECC type house, and going to passive house is about 10,000 premium. But that's all really out the window now because of inflation and whatnot. And so there's really not a good way to give you a definitive number until the economy is flattened out and smoothed out.
Can you give us a range though?
I just did. That's the range, but it's based off of kind of pre-pandemic economic situation.
But it was really helpful. That was exactly my question. When you have the 5 tiers and you get 7,500 back, 7,500 against between 8 and 40,000, or 7,500 against $10,000 in cost?
Exactly.
I think we expect the incentives to cover the majority of the incremental cost for those measures.
That's for all 5 tiers?
Yes. And with, especially now with the all electric incentives too, if you were to layer that. So basically what she described, $10,000 grant that they're giving for all electric, that's basically the next gen program. So that's a $17,500 incentive to sell plus the 10. I would be very surprised if that does not more than cover the cost of reaching that tier.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to know. I think just like to step back again, just remember that like the most expensive line items in your estimate are almost always excavation, concrete foundation, your framing, your roofing, your siding. So like windows, yeah. So it's kind of like the more you can reduce,
Yeah.
the better off. And I know
Yeah.
that's challenging, but
And that's
it is something to
something
think about.
to consider when you start talking to your architect and builder, is that there are choices that you make, and the window choice is a huge one. From an energy perspective, you start getting penalized in essence when you start going beyond 15% window to wall ratio. And so deciding, having a design criteria that you're going in with, or a mindset that you're going in with, to say, well, I love the way you design things, but we'd like to keep our window to wall ratio in this range because we want you to design that way because we think that you can get the same benefit from those windows and the ability to connect between inside and outside with fewer windows there. Or even deciding to pick fixed windows off of between operable windows. You don't need an operable window in every location there. And non-operable windows are less expensive there. Plus they're more airtight. They're going to help you in your efficiency and durability and all those other things as well. So those are the types of strategies that I think Frank is getting at, is thinking about the form and function of the house you want to build to be able to optimize the money that you're going to spend in your project.
With respect to the window to wall ratio, let's just hypothetically say you want to be at 40%.
You're not going to meet. You're probably taking yourself out of the ability to meet any of these incentives there with that type of ratio.
What is the
15%. You start getting penalized. You start getting penalized, in essence, if you're above 15%.
I was gonna say something just not quite tracking. So for the passive solar, when you're talking about a smart envelope, I've heard that's basically talking about you're double framing your wall and having an air gap, right, between those.
Not an air gap, but yeah, double.
Or a double some sort of gap, right?
Continuous insulation.
And so the builder's like, I mean, we're a little bit stuck. We're in an HOA. They're not letting us build a small house. We kind of got to stick to our original footprint. So he throws out something like, well, we look at $100,000 for all that. You're basically doubling your framing kind of thing. And I guess I'm not quite tracking with the concept of these incentives will cover everything up front kind of thing. I mean, I realize it's going to depend on everyone's house and exactly what it is.
I would say that the first thing, to take you off the hook here, is that you need to have a hard conversation with your builder, because when they're throwing out $100,000, it just sounds so way off. And that there are other solutions than a double framed wall out there to be able to do it. You know, you can use a traditional 2x6 wall with continuous exterior insulation. You can use ICFs. You can use, there's so many different systems out there that your builder, you know, probably. I guess the number one reason we hear the inflated costs from builders and trade partners is because they're not experienced with the materials that they might have to use to build these systems. It's not really the materials, it's the systems that they're being asked to use to this. So they're building in this fudge factor because they don't necessarily know there.
I guess it just goes to picking your correct team.
Yeah.
And the problem I have with a lot of these websites, it's great. You list all these people available and you go and contact them. And it looks like, yeah, they built 2 houses a year. Right, and there's 1,000 homes here. So challenging getting
It
the
is,
correct.
it's very challenging.
We're going to go to some questions from our virtual attendees, and then we'll come back to so hold your questions and we'll come back to them. First one here, can someone distinguish between the 2 different pathways for the passive house certification?
Yeah, it's not that they're 2 different pathways. It's that the Passive House program was originally developed in Europe and Germany specifically. When it came to the United States, they realized that there are multiple climate zones in the United States that aren't in Germany or in Europe. So they customized the Passive House program for the United States. And over the course of time, it's become more and more customized to the specifics of the United States. So the goals are the same, and they're just slightly different how they're reaching that ultimate goal there. And so there's the Passive House Institute US or FIAS group, and there's the PHI or European group. They're both very good. They both are basically doing the same thing, but they're achieving that goal slightly differently.
Next question, is there any research that's been done for the induction cooktop magnets in relation to heart defibrillators?
So
And any issues with that?
There is, and that's something I neglected to mention, that is a concern. So if there are any pacemakers, things like that, it is something to take into consideration with the induction. Each cooktop is different, but yes, that is something to be aware of and something to look into before purchasing with your cooktop.
Next question.
Yeah. So if you get an induction stove and you end up getting a pacemaker, you have to take that stove out?
No, not necessarily. I'd have to get back to you with further details on it, but my understanding of there's a very minimal risk and it's very dependent. So I don't have the exact documentation on me right now, but I can get back to you with it too.
I'll make sure that we include that question in a follow-up. We're going to send out a follow-up Q&A to everyone that attended and everyone that registered online. So we'll include that. How many heat pumps would be required if there is no ductwork in the home?
It depends.
Yeah.
So the question was how many heat pumps are needed for your home? And it depends on the size of your home. But the reality is that in essence, you're using one heat pump with multiple heads that can attach to that heat pump. So you have the heat pump, think of the heat pump as your air conditioning coil that's sitting outside your old house. that's the heat pump unit. You can, on most of these units, you can attach multiple heads, usually up to 4 or 6 heads to that. So depending on the size of your house, you might need 2 of those outside units if you're using this ductless model that Rachel was talking about. If you're using a ducted model, you'll probably only have 1 of those boxes out there because it will be sized, that box will be sized properly to be doing. And then if you have ground source heat pumps, it's dependent on the number of wells that you're drilling for that type of heat pump.
Next, could someone speak to the idea that heat pumps don't work well on cold days? They become inefficient and they become expensive to run in the cold.
So cold climate heat pumps now, technology has improved a lot. And as she was mentioning, some of these mini split systems can operate at 100% efficiency down to negative 17 degrees, 20 degrees. And even the ducted systems can, most of the cold climate heat pumps run down to at least 100% at 0 degrees.
I'd also like to point out, I think it's really important. A lot of what the information that people have on heat pumps and the feedback that they're providing is when they put a heat pump into their existing home that was maybe built in the 70s. It's very different when you're putting a heat pump into a brand new home that was built very tight and designed for this heat pump because it's going to operate a lot more efficiently, a lot more effectively. It's the homes that we're trying to retrofit a heat pump in that's not well insulated. It's got like a ton of corners, all of that. Those are the ones where the heat pumps really have more trouble. Like, it's still possible, but with a new home, heat pumps can work really effectively without much effort.
All right, we'll go back to questions from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
In regards to heat pumps and the geothermal, is that what you're talking about when you're talking about a ground source?
Yeah.
So how do we go about finding a company that will do this? I mean, do you have lists of companies that you could recommend? I mean, it sounds great, but I need more information.
Yeah, and we actually, so that the Rebuilding Better website, that equipment discount related to ground source heat pumps, it does note specific companies, manufacturers for those. There also are companies that are out there. I can provide a list. There's a small list through Excel Energy that offers for ground source heat pump contractors that I can share with you. There may also be your builder, architect, designer. They may have people in mind if you mention this as well. But yes, there are companies out there that can do that and we can share it. It can be.
In this area right here.
It can be, and that it's something to take into account given where your property is at. If there's a mine there, that may affect the ability of geothermal.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about too is like, it's helpful if you have someone who can help you with making some of these decisions, because sometimes you go in thinking like, I want geothermal, but sometimes it's just not the best for your situation. Whether it's just like a geothermal system is just oversized for your, it's just not worth the money for your build, or maybe it doesn't work because you have mines, or whatever the situation may be. It's like, maybe don't hold on too tight to one specific idea. Just know that you have options.
Can geothermal be used on a lot sizes of lots we have here, or do I need 40 acres to have geothermal?
They're down in city lots in Denver.
Outside the city lot.
They drill a vertical well, so in your driveway and yeah, mines it might be. Generally 200 to 700 feet, somewhere, depends on the loop that you're trying to create. The demand that the house needs to be.
I will add, there was a really helpful presentation that was put on a webinar that was recorded that is now linked on the Rebuilding Better website under the events and trainings page that discusses that they were very Louisville specific, just FYI, but it does discuss that and actually brings up the mine issue as well.
I have some questions. One, can 2 houses share a pump? Like if your next door neighbor and you wanted to go together?
Yeah,
I wish.
you can, but I don't know if the jurisdictions will allow it. There are communities that have common wells and distribute it, but that was designed as a community. So I think it might be a question for specifically for your code officials.
And the other one is the $20 million that just the state did. Is that one time or is this gonna be each year? It's renewed?
I'm not sure. I think,
I believe it was one time, and it's for disasters dating back to 2018. So there's other disaster recovery than just Marshall Fire, but there's a specific amount that's allocated. Yes.
So I have concerns about two things. One is air tightness versus radon. And the next thing is all electric versus the grid, because if you cut out gas, you don't have a backup if the grid goes out. And the grid is not great. I understand all electric. I understand the benefits, but I'm concerned about the grid being able to supply what's going on. And I'm not ready to cut off gas completely because I'm not comfortable with the grid.
So, I don't know, I'll jump in. The first thing is that no one's telling you you have to go all electric. They're definitely incentivizing you into, I think it was Frank's point, it is the direction that the industry is going, that municipalities are trying to move that way. It's the direction that Xcel Energy is moving. So there are ways to mitigate your resistance or in essence fear about being without power. There's battery backup. There's that's in conjunction with solar on your roof. There's building to a passive house standard or beyond, so that your house can swing through a down period. It's very unlikely that you're going to be down for a month. You might be down for a week, but there's direct evidence that what happened in Texas a year or two ago with the deep freeze that happened there are houses that were built to these standards that were able to swing through that, and not a pipe broke. They were able to maintain comfort in that house. Yes, it's reduced a little bit. You might have to put on a sweater, but there are techniques to be able to swing through that. With regards to radon and house tightness, they're two separate issues. You want to build your house tight and ventilate it right. That's to gain control and predictability of the air. That also helps to stop the radon from coming into the house, because air leaves and air has to be replaced to keep that constant volume of air in that house. So radon is coming up, and it's a requirement, it's a code requirement now that you have at least a passive radon system in your house, which would be basically poly underneath your slab, your basement slab, for example, and a pipe that goes to a gravel base underneath that poly, all the way to the roof of your house, the highest peak of your house there. And passively, just because air warms and rises, it will take that radon directly through your house into the outside there. And then you can, if you did test and there was an elevated level, because of your specific location, you can put a fan on it and basically pump that air out from underneath your foundation so that you don't have a radon issue inside your house.
But that is the code now, they have to do that? It's not a choice for us to.
In most jurisdictions, I would have to double check here, but most jurisdictions haven't amended that out that I'm aware of.
I have a few questions here for Xcel Energy. If everyone goes fully electric, does Xcel have the infrastructure on the ground to handle the load?
If you were to today switch over every house in Denver, probably not. But what we're seeing here with pockets of houses here and there, yes.
And when would a resident get the incentive money from Xcel? Is it upon completion?
Shortly after. So when the last energy inspection happens and they submit all the required documentation to us, we review it and then send out that check.
Are there any discounts at this point for induction cooktops?
the only discounts for induction cooktops right now are what are built into kind of the rebate packages, the rebate package through Xcel, which would mostly align with that Energy Star Next Gen certification. It's been previously called new certification until it got a name. That it requires induction, so that's kind of considered more of a package deal, similar to that $10,000 that was just announced. It's not specific to induction, But it is something that's a part of a whole home electrification package, which would include induction.
Is closed cell foam an acceptable insulation option in the various Energy Star programs?
Yeah.
Okay. Last one here. What performance metrics should we be asking our builders for?
Well, I would say the first one is one of these incentive programs is a great way to create a metric that your builder needs to achieve. You can go beyond that by specifying a energy rating index score that you want to achieve, and you can go to resnet.us to learn more about energy rating index scores. You could have an air tightness metric. You could have a passive house body. It's basically a BTU per person.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't know what it's called.
Metric, but there's an actual energy load for the house that passive house is. So passive house is basically a building standard that a program kind of is built around, but the building standard says that you can't have more than X BTU per square foot or X BTU per person in the house. So there are a variety of different ways to create metrics performance metrics that your builder could build to.
And the Energy Star V32, Zero Energy Ready, and Energy Star Next Gen all involve an ERI, which is a performance metric. So
Yeah.
you see those.
Yeah, and then just thinking like, regardless, you're gonna have to build to the energy code. So you're gonna have to build to at least the 2018 energy code, less than 3 air changes per hour at 50 pascals, or your minimum installation values, which is it's a prescribed path that you can look up anytime, but your builder will know that.
You talked about training for the builders for the Energy Star. How long does it take for the training? We have so many homes. Does everyone on the crew have to be trained, or is it just the contractor?
So,
how does that work?
A builder has to partner with the Energy Star program. And partnering is basically a 2-hour kind of webinar based training. And then they can seek out additional trainings through the Green Building Guild or their energy rater, their energy consultant that they might work with is a great source of training for them. It's really just understanding all the parameters of the programs and the requirements of the programs and giving them the opportunity to ask the questions that they need to ask. A good builder would include their trade partners and field staff in those types of discussions there. And that's when we talk about building your team and doing what we might call a design charrette or a design integration meeting where you're bringing your team together and you're talking about the goals, and they can ask the questions about, how do we actually do X, Y, and Z that's required by this program.
Yeah, and for passive house, there are many trainings. It's usually a several day program to get passive house trained, but not necessarily everyone has to be trained. Obviously, the more people involved that are trained, the better your project will probably go, but you're also going to have to get certified at some point. So and that usually is a process along the way that happens. You want to check things before you close your walls up and all that kind of thing. So
It just seems like it could
process.
delay a lot of building.
Yeah, I mean, it's not.
Time-wise, and we're facing. time
So
crunch.
for passive house specifically, the builder doesn't have to be trained. It's beneficial if they are, but the only requirement is that you work with a certified passive house consultant. And there are a lot of them. You can go to THEIS's website. There are a lot in Colorado. And then that you work with a certified passive house rater. There aren't a lot of those in Colorado right now, but I'm betting that there are a lot of people that are going for that certification right now because it's a business opportunity.
We're going to take one more question with the full group, and then feel free to stick around. Our experts will stay here to answer your questions, but we're going to release everyone else. If they're interested in staying, feel free to stay, but you're free to leave. But we'll take this question back here.
My builders say they're green.
Yeah.
In Boulder County especially, they say they've been green for 20 years now. But except for an Energy Star rating on their website, do you have any way to know if they're well schooled?
Yeah, so a lot of the programs have the builders that are partnered with the program on their website. And some of them will list the number of homes that they've built to that program and certified to that program. But there is no certification, there is no continuing education program. There's no true certification for builders and building contractors.
So they can say they're green, you could come out later and say.
Yeah, so it's important to ask those questions.
And that's why to push them that pre-qualification at Excel and Residential Science Resources, we can help them to make sure they know the requirements and build those requirements.
Is there a list of builders that qualified with?
For Energy Star, there is a list, as an also for zero.
Yeah.
There are lists of builders that are qualified for the show standard. I will say though, with these new standards, Energy Star and 3.2 next gen and 0 ready version 2, they're brand new programs, so nobody's built the Energy Star.
They're brand new programs, but they're very slight tweaks.
Yeah.
So anybody that's listed on Energy Star's website should not have a problem doing the 3.2 program.
And PHI and FIAS both have directories.
Yeah.
Which have designers and builders listed that have been trained, but they're kind of trash in terms of searchable. They're not very well done.
It's hard to.
But you
sort
can-
through all of this.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I will say too, Excel Energy at one point did put together a list of certified Energy Star, zero energy ready homes and passive house builders in Colorado. That is available on the rebuilding website under, I want to say, the rebates and incentives
Yeah.
folder.
And I guess the last thing I would say is that I think there is a resource already on the website, but I'm trying to bolster it, which is basically questions that you can ask your builder and architect as you're starting to interview and search for those, so that you don't have to be a building science expert, but I think if you ask these questions, you would have a good idea of their ability to carry out your objective.
We're going to stop there for group questions. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. Please take a minute, fill out the comment cards. You can turn them in the back, and our experts will stay here in case anyone has more specific questions that they'd like answered, but feel free to head out. And thank you to everyone that tuned in on Zoom tonight.
Yeah, something you said. If we not meet any of the 5 tiers of energy sustainability, if we have greater than 15%, could you, none of them?
No, you can meet that. You can meet them if you have greater than 15%. He was specifically saying 40%.
Yeah.
I mean,